Still a little nervous. A Miraculous Ladybug Fanfiction written and narrated by Mira, with artwork for the opening and thumbnail image by Cocoscartoons. I'll have Coco linked in the description box. This video is a compilation of both chapters for this miniseries. Please enjoy Still a Little Nervous. Chapter 1. Adrien aggressed. Adrien read once, in some magazine he was featured in, that if a guy puts his hands in his pockets, it means he's comfortable around you. So, after learning his very own classmate, Marinette Chang, was Ladybug, he made a point of always putting his hands in his pockets, despite his nervousness. What else was he supposed to do with them, after all? But pocketed hands couldn't hide his heated cheeks and averted gaze, and even the class picked up on the awkwardness between them. As cool as it was that Marinette was Ladybug, it also meant she'd seen every uncool side to him. Sure, parts of Cat Noir were uncool, but double that? No wonder it was hard for Marinette to speak to him. This was like the time he nearly kissed her for that class video and she spent the rest of the week stuttering and running away. But this was post-reveal week 2, and it seemed like they were making progress. Perhaps he was asking for too much, but Adrien made a resolution when he got up this morning. He'd ask her out today. Not like dating, ask her out, but like a movie or something. Yeah, a movie. No romantic strings attached. Just, a way to get used to or improve this new dynamic. It was the responsible thing to do. It's not like they could stay awkward forever. That wouldn't be good for them or Paris. So yeah, they simply had to spend time together. No other choice. Thankfully, Adrien had a better idea than a movie in class, so he pulled out his phone and texted Marinette, "Let's go out," as their teacher continued her lesson plan. He heard some kind of eep behind him and had to resist the urge to look. Was it really that bad of an idea? "Slick," a voice in his ear said. "Alia." He battered her away by pretending to scratch an itch on his neck. "I'm not asking for your afternoon," he shot back, catching the teacher's attention. She made him solve the problem on the board, which was no trouble, but embarrassing nonetheless. He accidentally made eye contact with Marinette on the way back to his seat, causing both of them to look away, flustered. Yeah, there's no way the rest of the class didn't know what was going on. Mylene raised her eyebrows as Rose covered a gasp. Great. The girl squad was sure to talk about this tonight. He was overly self-conscious with the rest of his class, cursing that he sat in front of Marinette instead of behind her as he questioned whether or not he put deodorant on today, or if he'd put enough on. Either way, he could feel sweat prickling from his armpits, which made him self-conscious, which made him sweat even more, and, well, he was a mess, physically and emotionally. He took his time putting his papers away after class, hoping Marinette would come to him. Sure, she came off a little shy, but the Ladybug he knew was bold and seized the moment. Carpe diem! HBIC energy, although he'd never call her that. But she didn't. He heard her shuffle by, leaving him to clear his throat and look up at her. "Wanna go home together?" he asked, voice cracking higher than he'd like. Marinette began, looking at Alia like a kid asking for permission from Mom. "Nino and I are gonna hit the local Starbucks," Alia said, looping her arm around Nino's. "Cheers!" "Alia!" Marinette exclaimed as Adrien's heart sank. As his best friend, she was going to reject him both as Cat Noir and Adrien aggressed? Ouch. Marinette stood, rocking her weight from her heels to her toes and back as he slung his bag over his shoulders. It's cool. It's cool, he said, patting her shoulder. I didn't mean to pressure you. You can help me walk, she blurted, taking him off guard as she recoiled from his touch. I mean, walk home, you mean? I mean, walk me home. Yes, let's walk home. Adrien couldn't help but smile. His first positive, affirming validation all day. She was nervous about this new dynamic as well. I was thinking we make a stop first. Marinette took a moment to compose herself. Where? The way she looked up at him, nervous and tapping her teeth with her fingernail, was too cute to endure. He wanted to look away, but also wanted to seal himself to the moment, writing it into his brain forever. The craft store. The craft store? Yeah. Okay. He shuffled his weight as he thought about how to exit the room. Trying to look nonchalant while leaving the classroom had never been an issue from him before. Should he offer her his hand? No, this was Ladybug, who rejected him far too many times. There's no way she would hold his hand right off the bat. He'd need to work and set a mood as the day progressed. A few intersections of awkward small talk later, they were at a craft store with Adrien's stomach sinking more with every step. He wasn't confident in his idea anymore. So, what are we doing here? Marinette asked, distracted by the display. I was thinking about making a house for Tiki. Adrien twisted the ends of his hair as he pretended to look at the display as well. For me? Tiki piped up, flying out of Marinette's bag. What about me? Plagg asked, also revealing himself. I'm good as long as it has a fridge for cheese. Like a dollhouse? Marinette asked. It sounded like a silly idea now, didn't it? That's disappointing. Was there a way to casually leave the store without looking like a fool? That's quite clever. She liked the idea? It is? I've thought about building one for her before, but I never found the time. I'd love to take the time with you to do it. You would? His question caught her off guard as much as it did himself. Yeah. Marinette shoved her hands in her pockets before paying extra close attention to a woven project. Yeah, I would. She shoved her hands in her pockets? That means she's comfortable, right? He certainly wasn't, but he wasn't the priority right now. Cool. Camembert. Why wasn't he better at leading conversations? Should he call Nino and Alia for backup? He shook his head. No, that wasn't a solution. That was a band-aid at best. What's wrong? Marinette asked, noting his body language. How could he confess? I'm just, super nervous and, am approaching this kind of silly, so... Her surprise took him off guard. You're nervous? No way! It's me! I'm the awkward one. You're, perfect. I mean, perfectly normal. You're acting perfectly normal. I'm just... She hid her face in her hands. Oh, no. Adrien smiled to himself. This was the Marinette he knew. Finally, he could start talking to his friend. Truthfully, Marinette, I want this to be a date. The kind that ends with a goodnight kiss and flopping onto your bed with a sigh to think about it. But you've proven time and time again that cat noir isn't cool enough for something like that, so... He ran a hand through the ends of his hair, brushing her fingers with the other. Take today however you'd like." A smile spread across her face, melting his heart. A new chapter. Huh? This is a new chapter for us. Adrien swallowed. She was open to turning the page. If you'd like, yeah. It's a good thing we've got a good backstory. How could she make such lines sound so suave? Sure. Come on, silly cat. We make a good team. There. Just like that, he was at peace. Just like that, he didn't have to blubber over his words like an underprepared presentation. Just like that, it was him and his partner in a craft store. Can I, buy you a rose? He expected a raised eyebrow or an eye roll, but instead, she turned pink. That would, depend on, Marinette cleared her throat and looked away. That would depend on the color, I suppose. Oh, just kidding. He was an underprepared student in the middle of a presentation, his heart practicing gymnastics as he tried to swallow away the butterflies in his stomach. This was his chance. If he picked out a rose for her, unlike all the times before, Marinette would accept it. Ladybug would accept it. Despite his hopes, Adrien was still a little nervous about making the gesture. Separating himself from Marinette, he went to the bouquet section and began browsing the felted flowers, unable to calm himself. Okay, yeah. Calm down, Adrien. Marinette is right. This isn't like it was before. It's time for a new chapter. Chapter 2. Marinette Dupang Chang. Marinette sat, nervous, next to Adrien on the subway with their bag of goodies, nervous as ever and trying to keep herself from seeing the kind of flower he bought. She would know if she tried, but thankfully she wasn't snooping. Kind of. When she'd gone to look in the bag, she brushed fingers with him and somehow ended up holding his hand. How bold! Then again, Cat Noir was super confident, so it's no wonder he made the first move. Sure, she'd brushed fingers with him before at the store, but she'd been too shy to go farther than that. Had he even noticed? A sinking truth ate her stomach. He'd notice if she were Ladybug, but now that he knew she was both Ladybug and Marinette, would he accept her feelings for him? Finding out he was her beloved partner and most trusted confidant only made it harder to confess. Oh, who was she kidding? Marinette was no good at confessing, secret identity or not. But this was a new chapter, and Adrien said this was a date. A date! She shouldn't be so down on herself. The circumstances spoke for themselves. She was holding his hand, after all. His hand! Her! Sugar and cookies. She might fade from a heat wave in the middle of October, judging by her pink cheeks. Marinette tried to beeline her way through the bakery without garnering her suspicion from her parents, but there was no way she'd let go of Adrien's hand on purpose, so her efforts were in vain. Her parents' smiles and an exchange of glances did nothing to soften the pink on her cheeks, but thankfully they didn't ask questions, choosing instead to welcome Adrien once more to their home as they went upstairs. "Slow down," Adrien said, squeezing her hand. Of course, Marinette, being Marinette, didn't slow down. She stopped completely at the gesture while climbing the stairs, causing Adrien to slam into her before they tumbled. Elbows and kneecaps and stair noses blended together into bumps of pain as they fell. Ah! Marinette gasped, more in embarrassment than pain. You okay? Adrien flipped over to check on her. Her face may as well be tattooed pink at this point. Yup, she exclaimed, sitting up a little too quickly and ramming her forehead into his, causing both of them to recoil. Full of energy, I see. Adrien held his head as Marinette sat in horror, not bothering to nurse the injury of klutziness. Sorry, I'm so... Marinette could slap herself. Here. Adrien offered her his hand. It's all good. Come on. Marinette took his hand, embarrassed as she was, as Tiki gathered the flyaways from the bag together. Thanks. No problems. Helped lighten the mood, don't you think? It did? Marinette blinked. Yeah, I mean, I'm still nervous, but I was super nervous coming here. It's nice to laugh with my friend, you know? There's that word again. Marinette narrowed her eyes before sighing, taking her hand away. I suppose. Her voice was flat. Like I said before, I want to date you, Marinette. The best relationships are built on friendship, don't you think? A few things flipped through her mind before she answered. I suppose. Her final answer. But it doesn't mean it isn't soul-crushing with the right timing. Soul-crushing? Being just a friend to your crush. She looked up at him with defeat in her eyes. Don't I know it? He laughed. Same thing's happened to you, huh? Marinette, finally composed, stared long and hard at him. This was the emotional equivalent of getting the timing of sliding doors wrong. Let's go upstairs. It was the safe response she'd opted for. Building the dollhouse was nice. As they painted chairs and laughed over Tiki chasing Plague around the room, Marinette felt herself begin to relax, finally allowing herself to sit comfortably with Adrien and her feelings. When was the last time something like that happened? Maybe when playing games together? When she had to focus on something at the same time? Yeah, maybe that's it. Sure, it was surreal talking to Tiki and Adrien at the same time, and she'd learned about Plague's antics firsthand. She'd always been skeptical of Cat Noir's description of him, but now she knew the truth. A few hours passed, both relaxed and tensed and full of brushed fingers and abrupt apologies. This not-so-suave side of Adrien was cute, and she was happy to see it. She was happy to be the reason behind it. Oh, let's be honest. Less than suave Adrien was still 10 times less awkward than her. But oh, the sparks that came when they showed proof of their nervousness at the same time? Marinette hadn't ever felt such electricity, or had ever had so validating. These moments, this time she spent in her room with him, made it all worth it. This date made her heart-throbbing feelings worth it. She was a glob of jelly that finally found a mold. The dollhouse looked fantastic. It really did. Even Plague, who insisted he didn't want one, was jealous. So, Adrien began, his fingers trailing the edges of his pockets. Marinette read an article of a magazine he was featured in that if a guy puts his hands in his pockets around you, he's comfortable, so he wasn't comfortable around her? She didn't know if that was a bad thing. Marinette? Huh? Oops. She hadn't been listening. Can we do my place next time? He ran his hand through his hair before sliding it down and into his pocket. You know, for Plague. She couldn't suppress her smile, but wasn't confident enough for a grin. Like a date? She clasped her hands behind her back, blocking him from seeing her crossed fingers. Adrien laughed, but it wasn't hearty. Yeah, like I said before, I'd like to date you, Marinette. She watched him rock his body weight and realized he was far more nervous than she was. And it was her fault. After everything, after all of this, she hadn't told him. Marinette hadn't told him she liked him. Me too, she said, swallowing back the frog trying to leap from her stomach into her throat. I'd really like that too. You would? Adrien's smile turned into that of relief. Yeah, because Ooh, this was hard. Even after his actions, words, and body language today. Marinette made the mistake of trying to maintain eye contact as she confessed. Oops. She short-circuited as his smile grew ever wider, and he stepped in. What was that? He asked, his voice softer. Oh, sugar and cookies. How could she respond when his thumb touched her chin? She kept glancing at him, then the ground, then him, then the... May I kiss you? She could barely squeak as he looked. No, gazed into her eyes, not leaving a chance to leave. Even her voice couldn't escape her. Fingers trembling, she cupped his face, each hand trailing from jawline to ear. And then... the singular heartbeat that slammed against her ribcage as he touched lips with hers knocked the wind out of her, beating each pulse so harshly that she felt its rhythm in her neck, her forearms, her chest, everywhere, drowning out her thoughts with the feeling. She didn't want to break away from his warmth and validation, but she'd stood herself on tippy toes when the moment came, and her calves were protesting. Sliding down, her hands tracing his neck, Marinette looked up and swallowed to see Adrien covering his lower face and looking away. His face was pink. Oh, good. This wasn't just some random kiss for him. Sorry, he said, his free hand gripping her shoulder. I need a moment to compose myself. Me too, she said, recovering her hands from his neck to feel how hot her cheeks were. When they managed to sneak a glance at the other again, they burst out laughing. Oh, how wonderful it was to laugh amid her heartbeats and flushed face. So, tomorrow? He asked. Yeah, tomorrow, Marinette said, still a little stiff. Good. He slid his hands in his pockets and spent a moment taking her in. What? Hands still in his pockets, Adrien leaned in, placing a chaste kiss on her lips. It was quite a different experience than the one moments before, but Marinette wouldn't change it for the world. And then he left, leaving her dazed at the doorstep. What about the flower? Tiki asked, who'd excused herself for the sake of privacy. The flower? Marinette repeated. Oh, yeah, the flower! She bolted upstairs, tossing discarded bags until she found the one she'd been avoiding. Tugging it out of the plastic, Marinette gasped. It was a lilac. Well, a faux lilac. A flower that meant first love. She was his first love. Oh, sugar and cookies. They weren't each other's first crushes. crushes burn and end. They were each other's first love. Putting the flower in a vase, even though it wasn't real, Marinette placed it beside the dollhouse, staring at it as the giggles swept over her. Love. First love. She was Adrien's first love. Oh, how wonderful it is that Kat hadn't moved on. How wonderful that she happened to be the girl under the mask. How incredible that she'd gotten to know a side of him that her classmates hadn't seen. How blessed their relationship was, forming a square so acute it was easy to miss. Of course, she was still nervous. How could she not be? All of the validation in the world wasn't enough to solidify the nerves that came at the start of a relationship. Ah, yes. She was still a little nervous, but that was all right. Marinette would take being a little nervous if it meant growing into a relationship with Adrien Crest. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as check out other videos on this channel. I'll catch you in the next one. If you're still listening, comment post-reveal Adrienette.